You're listening to Graphic Novel Explorers Club podcast, an audio book club.
Thanks for checking out today's episode of Graphic Novel Explorers Club. I'm one of your amazing hosts, Dennis Supachana, joined by...
Not so amazing, Johnny.
And...
Your ultra amazing host, Francis.
Today we're discussing Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. We hope you've already read today's title because all three of us have already read the book. So beware, spoilers ahead. We would love for you to share your opinion and thoughts with us. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GN Explorers Club, leave a comment on our Facebook page, or email us at gnexplorersclub@gmail.com. Graphic Novel Explorers Club is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are available. Today we're looking at Through the Woods, stories by Emily Carroll. It's an anthology series, a little different from what we've done in the past. Usually we do one volume. It usually covers one story arc or maybe even a complete story. This time it's an anthology, a horror anthology of about 5 different stories.
You said horror, right?
Horror.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, Johnny. Horror.
Because I'm starting a different podcast about penthouse letters. So
Oh, that would be awesome. I like it.
Don't steal my idea.
I like it. So it starts off with an introduction. It goes into basically, I assume it's self-reflecting of the author, where they talk about how when they were a kid, they would not, they would be reading late at night, and then they'd be deathly afraid of turning off the bed lamp because they were afraid of what was just beyond the dark. And it's something I actually really related to. As much as I watched horror films as a kid, I also was deeply terrified of monsters in the dark, and I saw shadows and shapes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, big time. I would see ghosts. Like I manifested in my mind. I don't actually believe in paranormal activity. And they were afraid that something would grasp them. In the story introduction, she was afraid that something would grasp her when she went to turn off the light.
Yeah.
And so that was a really good start to it. In case no one knows, Emily Carroll actually is famous for doing web comics, and a lot of them have kind of a macabre nature to them. I don't think she's from Canada, and I don't think she has any prior publishing experience beyond the ones that were on the web. And a lot of these appeared on the web originally. Although
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in slightly different format, and we can talk about that when we get into the stories.
The cover of the book, it's just black, white, and red,
Mm-hmm.
and it reminded me of the introduction to the Masterpiece Theater on PBS.
God, what was that guy's name?
Richard Scarry.
Is that the guy who did the art? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
He would do the introduction on that. He and the Addams Family, the original drawings.
Exactly. Old school.
And that guy's last name was Addams.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the two illustrations, her style kind of reminded me of.
Right. And so because it's broken up into basically 5 short stories, there's not going to be a whole lot for us to discuss in terms of things like we normally do. But we'll go into each one and we'll see what our feelings are. The first one is Our Neighbor's House, and it describes the story of a dad who goes off hunting and tells his 3 daughters that if he doesn't come back in 3 days, that they're to go to the neighbor's house. And then he doesn't come back in 3 days. They assume he's dead. And then they try to wait it out. They don't want to leave. And one by one, the sisters get picked off. And eventually...
well, the middle sister... She's like, let's go to because the dad tells him if I'm not back, go to the neighbor's house. And the entire time she's like, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And the older sister is like, no, we'll stay and then wait it out.
And then she says a man visited her in the night with a wide grin and a wide brim hat. And of course, there was no evidence of such a person. The middle sister looks for this guy, assumes that he's taken the older sister because the older sister disappears the next day, and she can't find him. And eventually, the younger sister disappears, and finally the
younger sister sees the guy too.
Right, exactly.
The following day, she says, "I saw the man with the wide brim hat
and the wide smile."
And the wide smile, yeah.
And then finally, she decides that there's no more food. I'm just going to go to the neighbor's house. She packs everything up. She goes to the neighbor's house, knocks on the door. The guy with the wide brim hat and the wide smile greets her. Of course, she says it was no smile and he was no man, or something like that.
Yeah, he was no man at all.
Yeah, and so it seemed to end on this note where basically she met the Grim Reaper.
I don't know.
So, sorry, something that we left out of this story, which I know we're all aware of, but the listeners aren't, is it's during like the winter and the snow's really, really thick. And the dad says, if I'm not home, dress warmly, pack some food, and leave. But the other daughters, when the middle one's like, okay, let's go, the other daughters are like, no, our dad's not dead. We're gonna wait for him. And then as the first daughter leaves, her cloak goes missing. And as the second daughter leaves, her cloak has become missing. So, and this is the interesting about all these stories. I don't want to get too ahead. I don't have a clear answer after reading this. I can't determine what, and I've studied like English lit. I don't know what she's trying to say, but I was under the same assumption. It has something to do with death. And I wonder too if it had something to do with sanity and being isolated in the woods.
And like I also, I mean, kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, is I tried to see what the overall theme, if there was like a connecting theme between the different stories, because some of them seem to be set like in the Victorian era,
right?
And then
some are more modern,
and then some take place in like the 40s or 50s,
right?
Or even I feel like each story kind of jumps ahead by like 20 or 30 years. So by the last story, it's kind of like right before World War II or right after World War II.
What I did find connecting somewhat in a lot of these stories is the number 3 and the connection that nothing good comes from the woods. A lot of them.
And all the protagonists are female.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, that's true. I didn't pick up on that. But yeah, a lot of times the number 3, 3 days, 3 kids.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Pops up a lot. So the dad says, wait 3 days.
I didn't either.
And it happens in a few other stories. And
you see the 3 cloaks lined up now that you mentioned that, the artwork.
And the one character in the later story only has 3 good limbs.
Right, exactly. Right. Well, and then the father goes into the woods. So there's a lot of this whole like, and then I think later.
Oh yeah, there's a story about the mother-in-law or sister-in-law that goes into the woods.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, 3 and then
Dennis has been Dennis on the spot with catching thematical stuff that neither one of us have caught.
Wow. I only remember it because of you guys. I have terrible memory until I get remember.
So after this first story, I'll do a full review at the end, but I was kind of like, And I was like, okay, let me read the next story and see what I think, because I was kind of left like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure.
Well, I feel like that's how it should be. If you're doing a horror anthology, it's not necessarily always going to be black and white. This is the lesson you need to learn. It's kind of supposed to be unsettling, right? It's kind of this mystery of what happened.
Well, especially an old school fairy tale style. Like these stories reminded me of like something like you'd go camping and tell.
Well, it really reminded me. When I was a kid, besides being, that's probably why. Besides being scared of ghosts and such, I read a lot of ghost stories. I don't know. There was a collection. It wasn't Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, my teacher used to read that to us in school, like in Halloween time. Yeah, there was like a book. It's pretty standard. Like one's like the guy who like, I want my hand, and
exactly.
Screams at the end. The teacher screams and like everyone jumps up in class.
No, so I used to read a lot of those, and then I remember, I think it was 6th grade, I read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe. I was obsessed with The Telltale Heart, and the idea that he would cut someone up, but he was so wrought with guilt.
Yeah, and you could hear it through the floor.
Exactly.
Correct me if I'm wrong too, but in the Filipino culture, there is a lot of mythical creatures in the woods as well, and it's a big part of like their story.
In Japan and China as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the original people. That's one of my really good friends is Filipino, and he would talk about his grandparents would tell him the story of the original people that were there before the Spaniards came, and how they're like spirits still haunt the forest and they'll grab you because they don't want you to be part of the cult. I don't know. It was a weird story.
So we go on to the next story. Anyone have any other thoughts on the previous one?
Other than I just wasn't really sure, and jumping ahead here, none of these stories gave me any sense of like, I never got a concise, oh, this was a metaphor for that, or it could just be there was a creepy dude in the woods killing people, or death came for them all eventually. Right.
And there isn't a clear thing, because the dad tells them go to the neighbor in 3 days. So the sister finally at the end goes to the neighbor, but then that creature greets her. So who knows if she actually made it to the real neighbor, or was the father basically sending them to their death?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's hard to say if it's a metaphor. It actually is a creature that lives in that house. So the next story is A Lady's Hands Are Cold, which I liked. Basically, it tells a story. I don't know, what time period do you think this is, Johnny?
I thought it was late
Victorian?
19th century, Victorian era, somewhere in there. Because or maybe even earlier than that, like post French Revolution.
Yes,
I got the sense this took place in a chateau.
Right. She was dressed very Marie Antoinette, kind of like. So.
Well, and she had like her handmaids.
No, that's true. Yeah. Very good. So basically, a young lady marries a rich man.
I got the sense that she was a dowry exchange. Like it was a marriage of convenience. Of this guy's rich. Your father. I need money. You're an attractive young woman. Guess who you're getting married to? And
then, as she goes to sleep, she hears this mournful wail. It's kind of a song, right? A poem.
Yeah, very Edgar Allan Poe-ish.
Right, exactly. I'll just read a little bit. It's, I married my love in the springtime, but by summer he locked me away. He murdered me dead by the autumn, and by winter I was naught but decay. So she keeps hearing this, and she's not sure exactly where it comes from. Finally, I think she's similar to the Telltale Heart.
Or Bluebeard. I also got the sense of like...
Very Bluebeard.
And because there's the wallpaper in the... She's like, it's an this extravagant home that she lives in, and her husband's always gone, and the wallpaper's blue. I pictured this blue velvety kind of.
It's so funny you mentioned Bluebeard. We'll come back on that because I have vivid memories of Bluebeard. But and so finally she finds pieces of the body buried. She sends her handmaidens away. Her husband, I think, went off on a hunting trip. She finds pieces of the body.
She destroys the home.
Yeah.
She takes an axe to the walls, the floors.
Underneath the stairs. Yeah. And she assembles the body together with ribbon.
Her handmaidens tie a red ribbon
but she does that. Neck. I don't think the handmaidens are gone.
No, but I mean, when they dress her, they
for the first time for dinner.
Oh, right.
She has like a red choker.
Oh, yeah. Like that. Remember that green ribbon? Yeah. Anyway, so then she finally assembles the body, and the body comes to life.
Well, all the severed parts she ties together with red ribbon.
Right.
So it looks like blood.
Oh, good point.
And the other, the moaning and the wailing of that rhyme is done in red. So it looks like it's red blood or like a river of blood with the letters.
And I should say that, and we'll circle back on it. The art's amazing, and I like how each story uses the page well for that. So for the song that I sang, it like Johnny said, it kind of just circles throughout the page.
I feel like Francis just had an epiphany.
Yeah. So this is so random, and it's not about the story, but right around as I'm reading this story, because we talked about this a little bit with the X-Men, I noticed this paper is very rough. Like, it didn't turn well at first for me. The pages were really difficult for me to turn. And because normally, I was like reading it laying down, I had to like sit up and like put the book down and then turn it that way, which is not how I usually read, which is random, but I just remember I was like, oh, this paper's like really thin. But I did again think they did it's very interesting how like sometimes like one page might just use the full page, one page might use the 6 panels, one page might have 2 panels. Like I did think it did help tell the story as well, but I just remember like, oh, this paper's not good. That's such a random thought. I was like, oh.
This is terrible paper. That's what happens when you have a webcomic come to paper. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, like, it just shows how much we've been reading comics lately, too, if I even care about the paper
now.
Well,
sometimes the paper does make a difference. I say the paper is a character in that last X-Men comic.
So, for sure, yeah.
No, that's a good point. So basically, at the end, she assembles the body, and you would assume that it would be one of those things where the former wife, who's now whole, would be grateful, but it sounds like she wants to basically kill,
or would warn her, but like, get out of the house. The husband murdered me.
A la Bluebeard.
Yeah. I kept expecting the husband to be a bad guy.
Right, and then this is where I got kind of confused. So the ghost ex-wife basically tries to take back her possessions, her necklace, from the current wife. And in horror, the current wife runs off into the garden past the husband who's returning, ignores his cries. It seems like maybe she's hallucinating.
Yeah, because the story says, like, even though nothing was chasing her, she still ran.
Right.
And that's when I was like, and that's it. That's the story, right?
Right. And then it just ends with, there was a girl and then there was a man, which is similar how it opens. But then and there was a lady with cold hands.
I thought this was just a metaphor for her insanity.
Yeah, like her mental health, or she didn't want to be in the marriage because it was an arranged marriage, so maybe she wanted to escape it. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if she just made up the fact that her husband had killed someone.
Yeah,
because it seemed like, well, if she never really found a body.
Well, who knows if that was her husband that killed it? That lady could have been buried in. It could have been a great
that's true.
parent that did that.
By the way, Francis, do you know Bluebeard? The tale of Bluebeard?
Not really.
It's okay.
It sounds like something I heard when I was little, and I just don't recall it all.
I'm sure you did.
Is it the sea? Is that the guy with the sea?
No, he kills his wives, and
it starts off basically he leaves. He marries a woman and he gives her a key to his castle or house and says, this opens every door except do not go down behind this one door. And she, doesn't go behind that door for a little bit. Then curiosity gets the best of her. She opens the door. It's really dark. She's feeling around. She realizes the room is filled with the bodies of his ex-wives.
Ew.
And blood. And she drops the key in there. And in some tales, the key is magical, so it's stained with blood permanently. So she doesn't know what to do. The husband comes home and is like, you opened the door, didn't you? And now I'm going to have to kill you. And in some tales, she's just murdered and just joins them. Other tales, her brother-in-law, along with her sister, basically murder him and bury all the bodies, and she lives happily ever after in the house.
That's every fairy tale, right? The woman kills her husband, lives happily ever after.
Or gets killed.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's funny you mentioned Blueberry, Johnny, because I had just been recounting to my friend a Richard Burton horror movie I saw as a kid that traumatized me, and it was from the 70s, and it turns out it was like a modern telling of Bluebeard. And it was just...
Bluebeard has always stuck with me because my mom, when we were younger, was dating this guy for a long time, and he took us on basically our first camping trip and told us ghost stories, and Bluebeard was the one that stuck out in my mind for whatever reason. So the Bluebeard myth or story has always just been one of those things that it's just I'm aware of it just because it struck a chord at such a young age.
And I'm pretty sure it's an old French folklore tale, so this could be connected to that, so who knows. So next story up is His Face All Red. Now this one actually appeared on her website, slightly different format, and I actually think in some ways slightly superior. The story basically tells the tale of two brothers, one not successful, the other handsome, well-liked by the town, pretty wife, and something mysterious is slaughtering some sheep.
And rabbits and livestock.
Exactly. Yeah, there's talk of maybe it's a monster or something, but they go into the handsome brother volunteers both of them to go.
No, I got that the less liked brother was like, I'll go do it. I'll go kill the beast, and everyone laughed at him. And then the handsome brother, the successful one, was like, no, we'll do this together. You're not going to be able to do this alone, basically.
Oh, you're right. It said all the town, when I offered to hunt the beast, everyone laughed.
Yeah.
You're right. Until my brother said, we'll hunt it together. So you're correct. And so they go and try to hunt for whatever the beast is together. It turns out to be a wolf. The handsome brother takes it down easily. And
the one who was going to hunt him, the younger brother, got scared and hid for a second, got scared by it. And the brother kind of laughed at him like, it's just a wolf.
Right. And then after they had killed the wolf, or the brother had killed the good brother, not good brother, the more successful brother.
Gallant. Goofus and Gallant.
Right. Had killed the wolf. The unsuccessful brother then thought in his head, yes, they'll all be grateful to you and not me, basically. And then he murders his own brother.
Oh, and there was a hole in the ground.
For some...
like a mystery hole. They couldn't see the bottom of it. They weren't sure what was in there.
Yeah, and then for this story and the next 2 stories, there is the hole or the caves in the wood, which is the focal point of all the stories.
So he drags his brother, whose face is all red.
Oh, wait. So do you think that hole is the same hole?
No, because I remember we talked briefly when you handed off the book if there was like a connection. You thought you mentioned you were trying to look for the connection. And the last story, and it's funny because so last night I read a lot of her stuff on her website. I'm thinking about this one story that's not in the book, but it doesn't have the hole either, so it's okay. But the other 2 stories, it's a cave in the woods.
Oh, okay.
But well, okay, no. So the last story is a cave, but then the second story, or the 4th story, which we'll get into after this one. I'm sorry to jump ahead. It's like a it is like a hole, but also a cave. There's something. Right. It's interesting. So. Okay. Yeah.
So the unsuccessful brother drags the now dead brother with his face all red into the hole, and then goes back and basically says, the wolf killed my brother, right?
He said the monster.
The monster.
He won't even say it's a wolf.
Right.
He just said, yeah.
Killed my brother, and
I killed the monster.
I killed the monster, and everyone
and he had
congratulated him.
He tore off a piece of his
brother's jacket.
Yeah.
Right. And that's important too.
To show like, oh, here's proof. Like
exactly, with his blood and everything. Yeah. And the townsfolk gave him his brother's sheep. His wife gave him a hug. Everyone liked him. But then
I got like he replaced his brother almost. Like he was even trying to hit on the wife and was trying to now live his brother's life.
But then here's the part where the number 3 in the woods comes into play. It goes, but 3 days later, my brother came from the woods. And parentheses, most strange things do.
Oh, you know what I just thought of? Sorry to cut you off. It's like the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Oh.
Easter in 3 days. Because, we'll keep going to the story, then I just got that.
I knew your Catholic beliefs were going to pay off.
Finally.
Someday. Yeah.
Well, because he said, like, when his brother comes back, he's like, it's not my brother. It can't be my brother. So I'll let you finish. And then.
So, yeah, everyone's overjoyed. But obviously the the unsuccessful brother realizes there's no possible way that could be his brother. He killed his brother. But it sounded like him. It talked like him.
And his jacket was whole. It didn't have the missing parts.
And strangely enough, though, his brother never looked at him. Even though he thanked his brother and told the townsfolk if it wasn't for his brother, he wouldn't be alive. He never actually directly looked at him.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
And so it was very unsettling. And so the brother couldn't, the murderous brother couldn't sleep. And one night he saw his resurrected brother digging a hole. He didn't understand what was going on. So he goes back into the woods to where he had left his dead brother. And this is where the webcomic, I think, does it more successfully. So that it shows him in the pages here descending into the tunnel.
On a rope.
Right. And then in the webcomic, you just keep scrolling. So it kind of uses the web page. So you keep scrolling down until you finally get to the bottom of the cave. Whereas this one has to kind of divide it into 2 pages. It actually has it where the page is longer because you're going down the cave. And that's where I thought it used it pretty successfully. So anyway, he sees his brother's dead body there. And then the last scene you see is the head turn, its face still red, and its eyes looking at the murderous brother. And then it ends.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out what that meant too. And I wondered if it has something to do with like Jesus Christ coming out of the dead and how like a lot of people don't believe that because like, or if he did come back but he's like not the same. I might be going too deep into it. That's one thing I just realized.
It could be the telltale heart, like his guilt. Yeah. His guilt. He's seeing his guilt. Nobody else is. Like he's imagining all these things, but they're not.
Or it's some sort of evil spirit that basically it's taken
the shape of his brother. Yeah,
and his brother is still, I don't know, somehow.
And he's grateful for like, oh, you got me out of that hole.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, so that, once again, like some of the other stories ends kind of on a unsettling, unresolved note, which I kind of like for horror stories.
This one seemed to be the most, the one that had the most kind of, conclude, like end, like solid end and conclusion to it. it's either his guilt or he released a monster.
Right.
Like
exactly.
that's the two things I got from it. It doesn't say specifically which one, but it's one of those two, I feel.
Any other thoughts on this one?
I disagree with Tronny. No, I thought the last story was the most conclusive. But I do agree. Like this one I understood. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's one of these. I kind of felt the same way. It's one of these two things.
Oh yeah. The last one is very.
Yeah. And I feel like now, as we're getting deeper into the book, there is more
connectedness.
Yeah, and like there is more like an overall. Well, except for this next one. This one was also kind of weird. But then, well, like, I would okay.
Wait, why don't you tell us this one then?
No, because I'm still thinking. Sorry, so I'm still thinking about this one that I read on the website.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting. It's about this woman who, like, it's her own psychoses, though, and it kind of almost reminded me of a Twilight episode. And there's no holes. It's very modern, but the conclusion was so amazing, and you almost, like, missed the conclusion, but it was like, wow. Like, and it was just more about, like, how it's... Well, I'll talk about it real quick. It's not part of this comic book. It was on her website, but it's like this woman, like, hosts all these, like, beauty parties, but she hates the products.
Right.
And she starts kind of like has like a mental breakdown at one of the parties, and her friend stays behind, and she's like, and she has all these like she sees people using the beauty products and they become like liquid form, it, like tears their skin up. And she asks her friend, she's like, what did you do when you had nightmares? And she's like, I just imagined a girl who slept through the night, and then I eventually became that girl. So the next day, like, she wakes up and she starts, like, using the product. It's like, oh, I really don't mind that it's stinging so bad. Like, it's basic, that's basically, like, how people are, like, they just put on a mask in society, and they're acting like they're okay, and when they're really not okay. But, so I thought that was, like, the most conclusive, and it's not part of this book, so I'm so sorry. We could cut that if we want.
Actually, I did read that story, and I did like it because it was one of those typical house party, Tupperware party kind of ladies.
And I do that like every month. I just went to a beauty party and everything in there is like so true. Everything she was saying is so true. Like, oh, it's so great. It's all natural. I use this all the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So back to the book. My Friend Janna.
Actually, I want to hear more about Frankie's makeup
parties.
Yeah.
Can we just segue into that?
Yeah,
for the
okay.
rest of this
We'll talk
episode?
about that. Which party did you like the most?
What was your favorite product?
So, like any woman who goes to these, the best part is you just go and drink wine.
Right.
And you
That's
eat,
what I hear.
and you gossip, and then you buy a few things for reciprocity.
Reciprocity, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So
that's illegal except in Nevada, right?
Yeah. So, but they all are the same. Like how it's so great and why they don't sell it in the stores. Like you can only get it through a consultant, and this is why.
Pyramid scam.
Yeah, but this one I went to last time was not a pyramid scam, which is why I liked it. So I was like, oh, like.
Well, they all seem to have the same shtick. I mean, whether it's...
Guys, I was kidding about...
I know. Here, we'll go back to the story.
Oh, sorry. So My Friend Janna, it's kind of a simple story. Basically, it's this gal who runs a scam, and people think she can communicate with the dead. They pay her money. In truth, it's actually her best friend who's behind the wall, shaking, making noises, rattling. And
the friend who's the two friends, the one who's the quote unquote spiritual guide, and then the other friend who wears glasses and the one who's in on the scam that makes all the noise. She's the one telling the story,
right?
The one that hides in the walls and rattles the wall.
Exactly.
So when you started talking about this, I forgot you were talking about the book at first. Because you're like, My Friend Janna. I was like, what? Oh, yeah. I was like, okay.
So she had this party, and they try to basically, after a certain point, they kind of feel bad. There's like some old lady who's like, please, I just want to talk to my son one more time. And they talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe we should have, just end it. And then they talk about how they can properly end it. And they debate about how dramatically or what makes sense to end it. Like, you can't just say this because then they'll ask more questions.
Or bump your head. And
right.
And now all of a sudden you don't have your powers anymore.
Exactly. And so they just continue to do it. And over time, it doesn't seem like a long time, but over time, the one with glasses, the one who's behind the scenes, starts noticing this weird kind of ghost kind of hover over her friend. But she never says anything to her, which is Great friend.
Well, and whatever the friend who's this creature spirit thing, whatever she does with her arms, the creature does too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when she wraps her arms around herself, it'll do the same thing. And it has like a red, what looks like maybe a spark or like the nervous system.
It looked a
or the
lot
blood
like a nervous system, yeah.
Yeah, like the venous arterial system.
Which I didn't quite get. This story confused me the most, probably. And the friend who is faking being able to contact the dead starts acting weird, has weird diary entries, and then finally, one night she comes to, I guess she goes to her friend's window and calls for her, and her friend says, I'll see you later or whatever.
Wait, which friend is?
Well,
which?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I wish I forgot their dang names.
Just say Glasses or not.
Okay, so Glasses is sleeping, and Seance Gal comes trying to talk to her, and Glasses doesn't want to basically talk to her, and so Seance Girl just goes back to her house, and then Glasses feels kind of guilty and noticed something weird in Seance Girl's voice, so she goes to Seance Girl's house, and then she sees Seance Girl on the second floor looking back, and like this weird lights emitting, like spirits emitting from her. And the next day, Seance Girl's just gone, just disappeared. They look for her. Everyone looks for her. They have no idea where she's at.
That scene reminded me of something out of like a 70s horror movie.
Oh no, yeah, for sure.
When she looks out the window and her eyes are all bugged out. And...
The whole book reminds me of, what's that called? Hammer. There's like a film studio in London, Hammer Films. They were famous for a lot of horror films back in the 70s.
Oh.
And it definitely had like that kind of sheen to it. But anyway, the Seance Girl just disappears. So then Glasses is just left by herself, and then it concludes with her seemingly not wanting to basically spill the beans that it was all a fake, and she'll keep that secret because her Seance Girl was always her friend, and then it looks like she's possessed by the same ghost and emitting the same light.
So it's like guilt again. Is that guilt that's enwrapping them or enwrapping?
Yeah, but it had that.
Them?
You're right. It had like the weird ghost that had like the veins. This is the one story that really confused me the most.
Yeah, this story definitely confused me too. But for some reason, it made me think a lot. It reminded me a lot, and it shouldn't have, of the Babadook.
I never saw that.
It's a really interesting. It's a really scary movie. Supposedly, I watched it. It's from Australia. I think it's Australian. But spoiler alert, people! If you haven't watched the movie, turn it off. There's this thing that's kind of following this family. It's kind of this monster, the Babadook, and it starts penetrating and it starts taking over. And the presence gets larger and larger. But really, what it is, it's all a metaphor for her grief over her husband's death and how this grief has taken over her life. And she ends up like she gets the Babadook, however you say it, locked up in the basement, and she feeds it. So basically, it's the way that I took that was like, she was able to tame her depression and her guilt surrounding her husband's death, which was not her fault. But it didn't go away, right? It's still there. It's still a part of her life. That
reminds me of is a Charles Bukowski poem called Bluebird. And it's his like sadness and stuff. And he's talking to the Bluebird about, if I keep you in my chest, or
I've heard that
put you
one,
away at night. And then it's one of my favorite poems by him. And then, but he's telling the bird, like, I'll let you out and you can fly around the room, but don't mess things up because you'll affect my book sales, or you'll mess up this. Like, I don't know. In some ways it's like a superficial story about his sadness or like depression or the blues. But then the other side of it is like, I need this to be able to function as an artist. But I also don't want to get so sad that just as a human being, I can't get that sad. I don't want to ever be that sad as I used to be back in my old, when he was a younger man.
And the way that I kind of viewed it, and I'm not saying this is correct, when she first started, the spirit started following the Seance Girl, it kind of reminded me of depression. It's like one of the antidepressant commercials where like the clouds following the woman.
Totally.
And like everyone else is sunny. It's kind of like, there's just this thing over her, impacting her. She can't recognize it, but other people can see it, and they don't really know what it is, and she's just not herself. And when she reaches out for help, people don't know how to help her, and then it completely takes over. That's the only thing I could really make of this, because it was so weird, but just really reminded me of the Babadook. And even the Babadook is like black and white with the red fangs. So that just made me think of that.
That actually isn't. That makes a lot of sense, because that would explain why her friend would see the monster or ghost, because she's closest to that friend. So
and she's aware of the I don't want to call it
the lies. She's lying to people.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So she can really see what's affecting her friend.
Yeah, why she's so guilt-ridden over what they've done.
Right, exactly.
And then she's probably feeling guilty because her friend probably killed herself or ran away, and she knew why she did it.
So that brings us to the final story. Well, I guess second to final. There's a conclusion, but it's not a full story.
It's like an epilogue.
But the nesting place, which actually is my favorite. It's probably the biggest chunk of the book. It's about a fourth of the book, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know if you guys got this. Like, for me, I thought these stories took place like either in New England or in England.
For sure.
Like she was born in England or London.
Well,
London, Ontario, which is in Canada.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I just got this
That's
sense.
Stupid.
I know.
Sorry, I'm sorry. That's really dumb.
Yeah, why would you have that? I agree. I saw that. I thought about that too.
I thought she was born in London and then like she moved to Ontario.
No,
like
because I know someone who's from London, Ontario.
Oh, you're from London? Yeah, but Ontario.
You don't sound like you're from England. I'm not. I'm from Canada. Eh? I'm a boot 5 miles from on.
That's how much those people, and it's not even in British Columbia. It would make more sense if you put it London in British Columbia.
Nope.
That's too on the nose.
I could see why you thought those were the settings. I thought that the settings were so nondescript. It kind of reminded me of this novel. I forget the author. I apologize, but it's The Road. It was made into a movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, so the movie is much different, but in the book, it's just the father and the son, and you just know something bad happened. You have no idea where they are. You have no idea if they're black, white, Hispanic, and I thought it was just done to be universal. Like that's why it was so nondescript. So being the woods are just like a really scary place for any kid, I think. So I think it was purposefully like, I thought it was left like, I mean, it's obviously
ambiguous.
Like it's obviously not a safari in Africa. Okay, so maybe it's not completely ambiguous, but it could be anywhere. It could be in your woods, in California, in England. Like, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead to the fifth story.
You're totally wrong, by the way, Francis.
And I was thinking, I was thinking about this other story because I was like, oh, we're going to get to it, but we're not because it was on the website. And it had to do with the woods and this whole, and like the father like killed people and like buried them in the woods and all the women come up. But the tree is still in this. The hands in the tree, I think, was in one of the pages of the comic book, but I forget which story.
Yeah, one of the stories, the leaves are hands.
Yeah, the leaves are hands. I think it was the one we just talked about, but there's a whole nother comic on her website and how that tree came to life from all the dead people, and the hands are the girls that were murdered.
Oh.
It was very interesting. So cool. I was thinking of that, and it's not in this book, so I apologize, but that was the one thing I saw that was kind of connected, this hand tree. But so we can talk about the last and my favorite story.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Basically, it tells a story of a girl named Belle and her brother Clarence and his fiancée, Rebecca. Basically, Belle at first recounts the story that her mom told her of these mysterious like fog that had teeth, round teeth, almost like one of those, what are those, ringworm kind of things, and would come and basically envelop a town, and it basically took her father, which is horrifying. Why would you tell a little kid this? Like that's not a comforting story.
Because you don't want to tell your kid he went out for cigarettes and never came back.
Yeah, right. So you want to say this mysterious fog filled with teeth took him.
Your dad died of ass cancer before you were born.
Right. So anyway, cut to much later. Belle is in boarding school. I'm not sure exactly what grade, but she has to basically go home for the break. She has no other place to go. So her brother Clarence says, hey, why don't you come by? I'm not sure if they live where her mom used to live, or her mom's been dead. And why don't you come by and hang out with Rebecca and I? We'll have a great time. And, Belle's your typical kind of emo teenager and says, fine, whatever. I'll go and visit you. And
but they're dressed like the 20s. Like she's Rebecca dresses like a flapper girl.
Sure.
Like this is set, like around Harvard or
right, for sure.
like
And
that.
you look at the cars, it's very exactly, probably like 20s, almost 30s, but not quite.
Yeah, she's 1920s emo.
And then basically Rebecca and Clarence have also, I think, house.
Yeah, just like a housemaid.
Housemaid is an older woman. Forgot her name. Anyway, Belle hangs out. She's like, whatever. And Rebecca's super cheery. Clarence is super cheery. And we should hang out, et cetera, et cetera. And then
what's the sister's name?
Belle. Belle is the younger.
Belle is always, like, the impression I got in this was she doesn't like the sister because she's taking attention away from the brother that Belle wants, almost. Or like she just, somehow she just doesn't like the sister for some reason.
Right, exactly. And then you start noticing something really weird. They sit down for dinner, and it does a close-up of Rebecca's teeth, and they kind of like wiggle, oddly enough. And
they look really sharp.
Yeah,
in the drawing, in the illustration, they just look really jagged and sharp.
And they just like wave in the air, almost like flags. I don't know. It was very bizarre.
That was a theme I noticed throughout. Was sometimes teeth pop up in weird, like your teeth aren't right. Like that was a sign that something's wrong with this
you.
person. Yeah.
Well, I take offense to that now.
You don't have teeth like they do.
So basically, the house. Belle, I think, hears some weird noise in the middle of the night, and she sees the housemaid say something. Well, she doesn't see him. She hears the housemaid.
Yeah. A sucking sound. She hears like the slurping, sucking sound.
And then she hears the housemaid and Rebecca talking behind some walls, and it's very mysterious. And you're not sure what's going on. And the next morning, the housemaid brings, I think, Belle some food, and you notice this ring of teeth on her arm, reminiscent of the creature that Belle's mom had told her about. And so she's not sure what's going on there. Later on, I forgot now, the chain of events.
Sorry, so
Go ahead.
It has nothing to do with the chain of events, but something that the story did really well that I had never seen before, and I think it just helps explain Belle so much too, and being what it's like to be a child. You see the bubbles on either side of her, the talking bubbles.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that was done so well.
But they're like cut off, like so you can see they're talking around her. She's only getting part of the conversation, either because she's not being included or because she's doesn't really care. She's trying to tune it out. But you'll see that a lot throughout. Like she's only get bits and pieces of the conversation, so she doesn't really see what's happening. And people are, she's there, but they're not really seeing her or truly acknowledging her.
No, that's a good point that I didn't pick up on was that just like you said, the conversations are happening around her, but she's not actually always actively engaging. Normally when you see a comic strip or a comic book, there's two bubbles, right? And then usually the character responds to whatever the other person's saying. But in this case, it's all surrounding her, like you said, chatter that's surrounding her, but she's not really being engaged because she's, I don't know, mopey emo teen. And then the next, go ahead.
Okay, so I think so. Like she has the bite mark, and the girl asks about it, and she like kind of covers them, so it's like, oh, nothing.
Right.
And next morning, she's just gone.
Well,
is that right or no?
There's one more night that happens where she hears something and she knocks on her door. I think it's Beau Comp or something like that, and the housemaid opens the door and she looks very.
She looks
weird.
like a ghost. She's like just ghostly white.
Right. It almost seems like her eyes don't seem to fit.
Like she's
her
been
eye socket.
Like she's like a husk.
Right.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't.
Yeah. It's almost like she's she's draped over her body. Her skin's draped over her body. It just seems very weird. And then the next morning she's gone. Rebecca explains that some family member of the housemaid had gotten ill, so she had to leave very early in the morning. But don't worry, she can certainly cook, hopefully as good as the housemaid, etc. And Belle's very suspicious at this point.
And so sorry, something I just remembered too, I don't know if we already told the readers this, like when Rebecca gets there, her brother is like, all you do is read, go outside and play. And she goes outside at one point, and the housemaid's like, don't go too far into the woods.
Right.
Rebecca got lost one time in a cave. It took us days to find her, so be very careful.
Right, and it comes that into play in the next part of the scene, once again, woods, where she's just sitting there just contemplating things, and she wanders into the woods. And then it shows a parallel between a black and white and color version of her now and also Rebecca in the past, wandering through the same woods, finding the same cave, and finally she falls into the cave and gets knocked out. She wakes up and then sees Rebecca hunched over with a lantern, and her back to Belle. And then when she turns around, you see that basically these worm-like things are coming out of her skin.
Yeah, it looks like flowing blood.
Right. It's almost like as if her muscle tissue, or it's like just a mass of worms are living underneath her skin. And Belle runs off, knocks herself out, and then wakes up the next morning.
And she heard, I don't know if you already said this, sorry. She heard her say before, like she saw her face, like, "Oh, my babies, I'm working on finding you a new home."
Right.
Did you already say that?
Yeah.
Oh, God,
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, you said it.
Oh, yeah.
No,
But like, so she like walked in on Rebecca, like having a conversation. And then when Rebecca heard her and she turned, that's when she saw her face.
And then
at first I'm like, who is she talking to? Like, I thought it was like some spirit or ghost or something.
And she shrieks, and I think Clarence, goes like, Belle, and then he's like, help me. And then she falls. So she does hear her brother. And then she wakes up the next morning. Clarence is looking over her.
Back in the home,
safe and sound. And basically, Clarence says that, thank goodness you're okay. Rebecca saved you. And basically, Belle tries to tell Clarence that Rebecca isn't who she says she is. And Clarence is like, whatever, you just kind of hit your head. I'm sure you're fine.
Hallucinating.
Right, exactly. Everything's fine. And Belle is not looking well at all. She's looking kind of sickly. And then Rebecca comes to her room after Clarence had left and basically spills the beans about everything that's happened. That it sounds like she's some kind of creature, that her babies are going to live inside Belle, and they're going to all go to the city with Clarence, and they're going to live there.
And she had tried to put her worms into the maid, but her
the maid was
body
too old,
didn't fit.
because she was too old, so her skin didn't stretch well.
Yeah.
Which explains why she probably killed the maid. Although, interestingly enough, the maid must have done it willingly, because she already had the bite marks, and she went back the next night. So I assume...
I don't know, unless they're like... I got the impression they're almost parasitic, and you don't...
Oh.
Parasites just get in you.
Right.
Trust me, I've had a lot of parasites.
And then, basically, Rebecca Monster reveals that she's going to put her babies inside Belle and use her skin. And that Belle says, people are going to notice I'm different, that I'm acting different. And then Rebecca says, no one noticed when, Rebecca came back and was different. She was a much nicer child. You'll be much nicer. Clarence will be happy. You won't cause any troubles, etc.
And she said too, if your mother was still alive, your mother might notice, because only a mother can really know their child.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, but because your mother's dead and you don't have any friends,
right?
No one's going to care.
Right.
No one will notice. Such a dig.
I know. That's like adding insult to injury.
So then Rebecca Monster slowly reaches out with her tendrils and starts looking horrific, and basically is going to absorb, I assume, Belle. And then Belle, thinking quick on her feet, talks about the pollution in the city, and like how the city isn't what you think it is. It's going to crack your skin. If they find out what you are, they're going to dissect you, etc.
The coal dust is going to kill you.
Right, exactly. And so Clarence comes in and says, "Are you ready to go to the city to go to the doctor for Belle?" And Rebecca refuses. Rebecca Monster basically is sold on the lie that Belle had told her, and is like, "I'm never going to the city. I'm never going there." Basically, because she doesn't want to expose her children to basically any of those horrors, so she's never going to leave the house. And so you think that Belle has won. So Clarence and Belle get in the car, and they're driving to the city so that Belle can get to see a doctor because she's not feeling well. And then I think Clarence eats an apple, and it's one of those with a twist endings, and it shows his teeth kind of clicking and clacking like you saw before of Rebecca's, and so it becomes clear that he's also one of them. So that's how basically the story ends. So it's probably one of my favorite of the entire collection. I liked how creepy it was. I liked
It's very Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, but even
not the 70s one, but the remake in the 80s with the kid. No, or Invaders from Mars. That's what I was thinking of.
Totally different movie, Johnny. What did you guys think?
Well, and then there's the epilogue. Oh, okay. Or you still want to discuss that?
Well, we'll go in the epilogue really quick. Basically, it looks like almost like Little Red Riding Hood, right?
Yeah.
And she's going through the woods.
Her dad tells her don't stop.
Yeah. So she basically goes through the woods, no harm, no foul, makes it through, no problem. She gets in bed at night, safe and sound, and she escapes the big bad wolf. And then the wolf comes to her window and says, and I love it, basically,
you have to get lucky every single time. I need to get lucky just one time.
Right, exactly. The problem is you every time you go through the woods, you have to go through there repeatedly, and every time you have to be lucky. The wolf only has to be lucky once, and then he's won.
Yeah.
So that's it. So what do you guys think?
Start it off, Francis.
Yeah.
I loved it. So at first I didn't love it because it's so inconclusive.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really liked the artwork. I thought the artwork was really great. And because it did leave me kind of hanging. So anytime I read a comic book, I never read reviews until after because I don't want that to inform or persuade you. Yeah. So sometimes I don't even read till after we talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was desperate to know more. Mm-hmm. So I started Googling and there's nothing. But there is her website. And then, because in my hungover stupor, I read every single comic on her website, at 2 a.m. And I liked her even more. And there's some really great stories on there, too. And she's also, I read about her trying to get more information. She is a contributor for some video games as well. She's done so well with her illustrations.
Yes.
She also does, some...
character or background design work, or...
design work, and she does a lot though. She's already helped with 2 video games, so it was interesting that she's the author and the artist because I thought she just did such a great job. And she did say these kind of came together. She started because she was working full time, she would do in snippets or chunks. Mm-hmm. So I felt to me it was very obvious after reading her website. These are just some short stories, but they found a way to put it into a book through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So they are obviously not connected. But I loved it because it left me thinking, and I'm still thinking. What was that? Was that death? Was that depression? We'll never know. Why doesn't she say something on one of the sides? How come it's not spelled out or? So, but
because it's better to leave it up to
but at some things too, and this is not criticizing, just observation. Some of the stories had this feeling of I've already seen that. I've already kind of nothing was really super new or inventive to me.
Sure.
Because we even said
the bride one.
Yeah.
Reminiscent of other tales.
Yeah, and the last story just felt very Alfred Hitchcockian to me. I don't know, just the look and stuff. So I didn't think there was anything new or groundbreaking, but I really did like it, and it's so different than anything we've read before.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the question I pose, and this is for all of us really, is why did this work when it's a composite of so many different fairy tales and ghost stories and Alfred Hitchcock, esque. Why did this work? But poor Justin Jordan. Why didn't Luther Strode series work? Or why does Quentin Tarantino work?
Mm-hmm.
And Justin Jordan, sorry, Justin Jordan, if you're listening. Why was that? Because these stories, I did want to. After the first, I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. I want to know what the rest of these scary stories are going to be about.
This is kind of my jam. Like I said before, when I was a kid, I liked reading short, scary stories, short ghost stories. And the fact that they're unresolved is kind of, in some ways, many ways, part of the genre. It's just some kind of unsettling thing. There's that story about a guy who picks up a girl hitchhiker, and he gives her coat because she's cold, and then he drops her off, and then he finds out that she actually died years ago in a car accident, and he finds his coat on some gravestone or something
like Large Marge from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
So you don't really find out like why is she haunting the area, like what's unresolved. You just kind of, it's one of those unsettling, nebulous stories that it's this folktale kind of thing. But for me, it was basically my jam. I loved the art. I loved how she was able to communicate dread, and just you just felt the darkness around you, and this feeling very much like the introduction where you didn't want to turn off the light because you felt something was going to come out and get you. I just felt that from these stories.
You know what's funny is after reading this, the next night, I woke up like at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't get back to sleep because I had this dream that Sasha, my girlfriend, was in the kitchen and a beast was stabbing or attacking her through, like it had smashed through the window, had gotten her and was like trying to kill her. And I just heard her screaming, and it was so real in my dream. It woke me up, and I sat up in bed and had to check to make sure she was there, because otherwise I was like, I got to go in the kitchen and get out of here. No, but yeah, it freaked me out. And I was like, oh, it's because of that fucking Through the Woods.
Right.
I don't normally have bad dreams, but I was like, damn it, Through the Woods. So,
yeah. And then this was recommended to me by a friend, and I had no idea or any context before of what it was about. That it was going to be an anthology series in the first place. And at first I was bummed out. I was like, oh, it's a bunch of short little horror stories. How could it possibly, they're not connected really, so how could it be good? But it was very engaging, and I found myself rereading it and just kind of reliving the creepiness and just admiring the artwork and even the prose. I mean, the words, like the little chant that the dead bride sings, etc. I just found it very good. I was going to say some more stuff.
Yeah, you guys already covered it, so I don't have anything to add to it. But I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
so.
I highly recommend it.
This random, but this also made me think of V.C. Andrews, because I used to read V.C. Andrews all the time when I was a teenager. Like,
those are the ones with the like painterly covers, right?
Yes, like Flowers in the Attic, those types of books. But so my sister and I used to always read V.C. Andrews. Back then, parents did not monitor anything like they do now. And we always thought, like, oh, V.C. Andrews must have had this dark, horrible life, because all she writes about is, like, incest and, like, how parents beat their children. Like, oh. Right. But then, like, when she died, her parents wrote this beautiful foreword in one of her books, and, like, how, like, they're doing their best to continue her legacy because she had all these unpublished stories. So they were working with ghostwriters, and, like, we're like, oh, like, wow, sounds like she had, like, a really loving family. Like, so I was also curious. I was like, because when it goes as dark as this did, and everything in this book was dark, I was like, what the hell is wrong with her, right? Like, what, like, mental, like, issue? I'm not saying she hasn't, but there's something to always be so dark or so twisted.
I know lots of people that are, like, fascinated with morbid. My ex-girlfriend used to love reading about serial killers. Yeah,
I did too at one point, and now they're big on Netflix. But yeah, so I don't think there is anything wrong with her. Let me just state that. I did go to their website, and it's interesting to see how people's minds work and how they think. And and I wonder, like, does she get scared, or because she crafts the story, is it, like, not scary to her because she controls it? So yeah. I'm disappointed there's not more about her, like, online, and that I couldn't find the answers.
I'm hoping she puts another one out. So. But yeah,
New York Times bestseller, so I'm sure she'll have another one.
And she does have material, like Francis said. Go to her website, and you'll find some more drawings or complete tales that are of similar macabre nature. So.
Well, where can people follow you, Francis?
In the woods. No. You can find me on Insta at Words and Waffles.
You can follow the official Twitter and Instagram account for the podcast at GN Explorers Club.
And if you live in the Sacramento area, we're starting a reading club with Oblivion Comics, and the first one will be June 16th at what time?
2 to 3.
And then if you want to follow me on the Twitters, it's Serious Talk Twit. That's it.
All right. Thanks.
Oh, this was our last one for the season.
Oh,
so thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, if you have suggestions for our next season, please let us know. We'll be back in a few weeks with the summer special. It's going to be different than last year. Preacher pretty much ruined us. So we will not be reading Preacher.
Again, we're going to do an annual read of Preacher.
Or like a volume series like that. We'll be doing some one-offs with a special guest host because Francis is too busy and good for us for the summer.
That's a true story.
So we will be back in just a couple weeks with the summer special, and it'll probably be 5 or 6 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll be back sometime next year, I imagine, 2019. Man,
Later, Gators.
I'll be old. I'll be 44.
Yeah. Me too.
So, yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
3, 2, 1. Thanks for joining us today. We're talking about Through the Woods, stories by Emily Carroll. I'm Dennis Supachana, one of your hosts. I'm joined as always.
Wait, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, because we'll do it at the beginning.
God damn it.
It's fine. Just keep going, because I'll just cut that out.
Cut.
Oh, that's so funny.
I always like Dennis's. I like his count-ins too. 1, 2, 3.
You can do this. You can do it.
Yeah. Season 2.